and say hello. Welcome to this afternoon's Talking Asperger's with Andrew. This is session 31. Can't believe we've got to 31 weeks already. And today we're going to be talking about something that probably crops up quite often to people in employment, and that is presenting skills. We all, at some point, have had to talk to our boss about something, or we've all been asked to do a little presentation for something. And that to someone with Asperger's can be an immediate, don't like that, not comfortable with that. And so I'm going to talk through some ways that I get over that when having to present to my work colleagues. One of the interesting things is if the people with Asperger's syndrome are particularly good at their specialized topic, they'll know their subject inside out, they'll know it in detail, they'll be actually quite happy talking to someone in break at work about the thing that they really love doing and the thing that they're really interested in, whether that might be Star Wars or Star Trek or Harry Potter or Game of Thrones or some MRPG that they play. So they will know their subject intimately and in detail, and in a normal conversational situation they'll quite happily talk about that subject at length in detail to the people that they're around. The problem comes when it's labeled, when we put the label around it, you're presenting to someone. That seems to have this change of mindset that I've actually got to stand up and talk to people. Well, you've been doing that most of your life, talking to people about things that interest you, things at work, things that happened on the television last night, or your favorite subjects, favorite things. And so we need to get the mindset different from casual conversation about that topic that you know to actually presenting and standing up in front of a screen or in front of a group of people that are your peers or your bosses and exchanging information. And I think it's really important that to start off is that you understand that you know your topic, because you do. Your boss wouldn't have asked you to present this particular subject if they didn't think you knew the subject. So it's not about familiarity with the subject. It's that daunting, potentially daunting, it's that banana skin of, what if I stand up and say something wrong? What if I make a fool of myself? What if people ridicule me? What if I humiliate myself? That's always looking at the negative. That's looking negative, negative. All those points I've just said, 4 points in a row, they're all negative. How about we change our mindset and we think, what would happen if I did really well? What would happen if it went well? If I got great questions and feedback? What would that mean? It would mean that people would understand that you have knowledge and you're able to impart that knowledge well, and you'll be seen as an authority on the subject, and that might put you in good stead for work. It might help you get a promotion or more responsibility. So that potentially daunting banana skin of, I've got to present, we need to take that language away from it and see it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to show what you can do, to show your skill, to show your communication abilities, because I have Asperger's myself. And when someone asks me about my writing, trust me, you a bit like Ken Dodd, you can time me with a calendar. I will quite happily talk for as long as people are there. I will quite happily talk about my writing. So people on the spectrum will know their subject. I'm counting. I know this. I know people on the spectrum, and I know they know their subject. So we need to get the mindset out of daunting, problem, ridicule, trouble. We need to get that into opportunity, chance to show your skills and your ability and your communication abilities. So that's very simply what we want to do. And so what I would do is when I'm asked to present, I think, okay, what am I going to talk about? Have they let me chosen the topic? And that's always a good thing, because I can then pick an aspect of my particular topic. I can break it down into 2 or 3 manageable pieces and talk about those 2 or 3 things in a bit of detail and then sum up. The key to this is not to think, they've asked me to talk about Asperger's, and boom, you information dump them with everything you know about Asperger's. The key is to pick 2 or 3 key points, make them relevant, and go into those 2 or 3 points in a bit more detail. That way, if they ask you to present again, you can talk about 2 or 3 more points, and so on. So it's really important that you structure your talk for the purpose that it is being given. And that's really important, because you need to have structure, because you've got all this information in your head. You want to put it down. You need to then find out what is relevant. What are the, I just said, what are the 2 or 3 key things that we need to focus on? And how do I illustrate those points? Am I going to do slides? Am I going to do some PowerPoint? Am I just going to stand and talk? Have I got other images, posters, or other images that you can use, that you can draw upon to illustrate the points? And the key to it is to keep things simple. Don't overcomplicate it, because it's likely that you know more about the subject than most of the people in your audience. So they're not going to want to be bogged down in detail and the nitty-gritty of it. Sometimes they do. Sometimes you're asked to give a detailed presentation on a very specific aspect. But this is the general talk that someone said, we'd like to talk about this project that we're working on, that you've been working on, and you know what you're talking about because you've been working on it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or a month, or whatever it is. So the information is fresh. It's, you know it, it's right there in front of you. You've been working on it. All you need to do is formulate your own way of putting 2 or 3 points together, how you're going to present that, what you're going to say, and think about what questions people might ask, and think about what, this is an important one, is what takeaways can someone get from being at your talk? Because just as delivering a report to a client, you want to, or having a meeting, you want the audience to be more informed and better informed when you've given your presentation than when they started. You want them to feel as though they have got something from the presentation, something new, something important, something that they didn't know beforehand or didn't necessarily understand beforehand. So you want to have 2 or 3 takeaways. What are their 2 key points that they're going to take away from this presentation? And make that the outcome of what you talk about, so that you're leading them down a path, you're leading them down a story to get to a point where the breakthrough point, the understanding point, will be obvious to them, because you've taken them through step 1, through step 2, through step 3, and bang, there's the conclusion, and they can understand that conclusion. They think, I've got something from that. That's an important point that I've got something from. And that's how to do a presentation, is to break it down into manageable chunks, 2 or 3 key points. What are the takeaways? And think about what are the likely questions that you're going to be asked, and see if you can cover them. But don't necessarily cover them all, because you will actually want people to ask you questions at the end to show that they have understood the topic, and you can give them a little bit more detail about those things that they talk about. So it isn't always the best thing is to tell them everything you know about that particular subject, because they will come up with a question. So it's better to leave something hanging that you've guided them towards, so that they can ask a question that you're expecting them to answer, rather than them thinking of something a little more left field, a little more different, a little bit more different to what you were originally preparing to talk about. So that's a really important point, is to make sure that they can have a takeaway, what key points and important points that they can take away from the presentation. And then it just comes to practicing, writing that down. If you're doing PowerPoints, the ways to present, there are plethora. There are thousands and thousands of ways to present to people. You can go onto YouTube and type in, how do I present to an audience? And there will be dozens and dozens and dozens of videos, all giving you different ideas. But my suggestion is that you, as I just said, you keep to a few key points. You highlight those points if you're doing it with presentations, and have a small amount of text on a slide, or have an image, and I would use that image, or that small amount of text, as an aid memoir to you, to take you through to the next point. So don't have lots of text, because people won't read it. They'll get lost in it, particularly if you're going through your slides quite quickly. They won't have read and understood all the things. So break it down into bullet points, short bullet points, or images, and you can say, I'm demonstrating this point with this image here, which shows A, B, and C. And then you can talk about it fluently with knowledge so that they've got a context to what you're talking about. And then it's just a case of preparing and rehearsing and practicing without over rehearsing. Time yourself. You may have been given, we want you to give a 10-minute presentation, or there may be, we want you to give a half an hour presentation. Those two things will mean different things, because 10-minute presentation, you're going to be more general. In a half an hour presentation, you can get into 1 or 2 points in quite a bit of detail, but still keeping a structure, keeping a rhythm, keeping a flow to what you're saying. So if you're using slides, keep them to a minimum, because people don't want death by PowerPoint. I'm sure some of you on the call today have been in meetings where it's been death by PowerPoint, and someone's had 50 or 60 slides that they've gone through in 30 minutes. You can't see them all. You can't take it in what they're saying. Your visuals should be a visual aid to what you are saying, not an information dump. So you should be using the visuals to aid you in what you're talking about, rather than being the focus of what you're saying and what you're presenting about. And then, having practiced and timed it and seeing that you're consistently within the same sort of time frame, all comes down to the confidence to set yourself up and stand up and present at that given time. And there are loads of techniques that you can use. I tend to just do some gentle, deep breathing. I know what I'm going to say because I've practiced and I've rehearsed. Then stand up and say, thank you. I'm going to talk to you about this point, and I'm going to show you these 3 areas, and these are the key points I want to talk to you about, and we're going to go through that in some detail. And then you just put up your first slide and off you go. I know it sounds easy to say it like that, but if you've practiced and you've rehearsed and you've timed yourself, you will know your subject matter. And so it's really important that you believe, really important, I'm going to say that again, that you believe that you're going to be great, you're going to be fine, and you're going to impart this knowledge to the people that you're presenting to. I quite often presented to my clients, not necessarily formal computer slides projector, but back in the day when I was doing it, it was an overhead projector with acetate films. I'm sure Damien has probably used those in his time before. But you just get used to it. It's you're having a conversation. It might be a one-way conversation, but you are having a conversation to impart knowledge to the people in the room, and treat it as a conversation. If you can inject a bit of humor into it, that is always good, but don't be forced. Don't think you've got to tell a joke, you've got to be funny. If your style isn't that, don't do that. Don't try and force a joke or a rude or crude joke just to think I've got to make them laugh. That doesn't work. That will be forced and it will come across as forced. But if there's a natural piece of humor, or you're telling a story about something that had a funny aspect to it, it is always very good to use stories to demonstrate the point you're making, because people will relate more to your stories. You will come across more companionable, more knowledgeable, and they will see the metaphor in the story that you're using to illustrate the point that you're trying to make. So personal stories is very good. It's a good way of demonstrating, because it demonstrates your knowledge and your abilities and what you've done before, but the stories are relatable to your audience. And I'm a speaker and a coach, and when I speak to clients, I use more stories than just straightforward talking to them. I will demonstrate a point. I will introduce a point, and I will demonstrate that point with a story, and that the stories really can bring a presentation to life. So I'm going to stop it there for the time being and throw it open to the floor to see how others who might be on the spectrum, or those who are just here for the first time, how you get on with presenting. Damien, I can't believe you've never given a presentation before.
yeah, I think lots of presentations. Just going well way back. I always hated standing up in front of people. Anyway, I would be extremely nervous and end up just not giving a very good presentation, just going on and on and on. But I sort of over the years have learned that the people don't necessarily, of course, want to know all the detail, and so when I give a presentation, well, firstly in the preparation, I will do some PowerPoint slides. I tend to use diagrams and headings rather than full text.
Yes.
So that can guide me. And also when I'm practicing, I can almost be guided as to how long I need to spend on each slide.
Yeah.
And also try to minimize it. So using slides, using pictures, a variety of things, not just Excel sheets, but pictures maybe to demonstrate something. Like if I'm talking about plant growth, I might have some pictures to show an experiment or something to show how the plants were growing from one lot of plants, one grew well, another lot didn't. And so have things very visual with a lot of color. Some reason I find things much more interesting if there's a lot of color. There's simple pictures as well as drawings, so a variety of different things in the presentation. And also before I go into the presentation, I try to work out what I want to get over to the audience, say 2 or 3 things, what I want them to take away, because it might be that I want them to understand a particular subject in order that they then can help me or whatever, or help the company in a particular way. So I need them to go away knowing that a particular problem, what the problem is and what the solution could be. So I sort of try and heavily concentrate on the objective of why I'm giving the presentation.
Yeah.
But with only as like 2 or 3 aims rather than a lot of different things, because people then tend to forget or get bored.
Yes.
Very quickly. They're trying to get over too much. So
I agree. I agree. It is important to keep it short and concise to a few specific points. Yeah, that's good.
And again, when I'm doing the presentation, because I can get very nervous doing presentations, I practice sort of breathing slower to try and sort of almost detach myself a little bit from the idea that there's a lot of people there waiting for me to trip up. So yeah. I'll sort of steady myself and try and relax as much as possible. A lot of it, though, as you said before, comes from the fact that if I know about a subject, then I'm a lot more confident and relaxed about presenting it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I remember one time, this was 30 years ago. Can't believe time flies. This was 30 years ago. And my boss said to me, there's a conference down in London at the British Geological Society. And we've been invited to send someone down to do a talk. And I'm volunteering you. And I thought, that's very kind of you. And so he said he wanted me to give a talk on one of the topics that a job that he worked on some years ago. And it actually happened to be a job that when I was at university, we were doing a tour of Scotland. And it was actually a job that during construction that as a student, we went to this site just to have a look at this job. So it was something that I'd known for a day. And so I had to brush up and gen up on that subject. My boss was very good. He helped me out with some slides and things like that. But the thing that got me was this was a proper lecture room in the British Geological Society. And I was fine. I was sat near the front and they called me up. I was the last person on, so I'd seen everyone else present in various styles and successes. And I was fine. I went up, I walked up, all my slides had all been prearranged with the slide projector. And it was only when I then turned around and faced my audience of this amphitheater of 200 people that I went, it was that point that it really hit home that I am presenting to an audience of learned people. And I had to take a little moment just to catch my breath and do what you just said there, Damien, have a little moment of deep breathing. And then I thought, no, just go for it. Put the first slide up and go. And that was really what it was. And I used the slides as an aid memoir for what I was talking, rather than trying to read from a script. I was using the slides, say, right, this is the slide I'm going to talk about this point, and and use them constructively to illustrate what was going on in the talk. So, but that was the first time that I'd given a proper formal presentation, was down at the Geological Society in London, and that was an interesting one. I got good feedback from it, but it was yeah, it was a daunting one, to be honest. Yeah, we had to do presentations at college in front of fellow students, but
Yes.
that was nothing like that level of presentation. So and the presentation was split into two parts. One was talking about the job that my boss had been on, and one was the job that I'd worked on. So the second part of it was much more familiar to me, and I was able to talk through that. I'd worked on this job for a year during construction, so I was able to use my experience and photographs that I'd had, and got slides made up and all of those sorts of things. So
Yes.
it was from a position of knowledge that I was able to talk and talk comfortably. But it was that moment of turning to face the audience of an amphitheater. I mean, they were all banked up in seats up into the gods, so it was quite a sight. You think, oh, how do people do this? But you get used to it. You practice and you get used to it. And I would imagine that you would pick one point in the audience to be the focal point that you would look at, and use that as your centering point, and then you would move from side to side. But yeah, that was one thing I did, is I picked a point about two-thirds of
Yeah.
about two-thirds of the way up. I thought, I'll pick that person there, or somewhere around that person, as my focal point, so that I could project my voice and I wasn't looking down. But once I got into the swing of it, I was fine. But that was interesting. Yeah. And now I talk about Asperger's and things to employers, and that's always fun, because I say I've had 58 years of life experience, and these tips and strategies that I come up with are things that I've developed from myself, and other ones that I've learned from researching the topic. So it's a topic I know well, and I'm able to use stories to help illustrate the points that I'm making to my clients. Yeah, it's quite fun, actually.
Hmm.
I can imagine that some of the things you talk on, you can probably get into quite some in-depth stuff on on your plant subjects.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had some good talks where I've brought material along with me, like some plants on with, which I find always good to have something. You're physically touching something as well as talking. It helps to in terms of presentation, also have a bit of variety. I've had other presentations where I've been told, okay, that's enough detail
Yes.
by people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've had things go wrong as well. I had a set up a demonstration of a hydroponic system of growing watercress, and it started leaking halfway through the talk.
Oh dear.
So
Uh,
that wasn't so good. But
yeah. I remember one
generally, it's
talk.
good. The more things, the more
Go on.
different things I have around me, the more easier I find the demonstration, and more I think people enjoy it as well.
Mm. Yeah, I think breaking it up is good. It's good. Yeah. I
I've
know
also
one.
given talks in schools as well,
Okay.
as part of a sort of interaction with local community, and there it's fun where, say, in primary school, you take pots and plants and seeds and so on. You've got to be very, very visual there
Yeah.
with your presentation.
Yeah.
But that can be fun as well.
Yeah. I would
So,
imagine going to schools would be quite fun. I think because kids are sponges, they want to soak up information, and they can be quite fun, I'd imagine. But I remember giving one talk to I was at a writing conference, and I was presenting to about 30 people, and I had everything set up, got the computer set up, all linked up to the screen, the projector. And one busybody from the meeting came up and nudged the projector just as I was about to start, and he broke the bulb. So I then had to present without a projector, without a screen, I just basically just had my computer and what I was going to say, but I couldn't present and show the images that I wanted to present. I was absolutely furious, because he was known as being as a busybody type of person, and he just
Right.
he just knocked the projector and broke the bulb, which was not very good for me, and it didn't do good for anyone else because bulbs on projectors are very expensive. But I was livid. I was absolutely livid. I couldn't deliver what I wanted to deliver because I couldn't show them what I wanted to show them because um, he'd ruined it. He'd ruined it. So, and there was nothing I could do. It was literally 10 seconds before I was about to start. So I couldn't go and find another projector, swap the projectors for another one. Didn't have all of that available to me. And it was just a nightmare. But I did as best as I could, but I was disappointed because my last slide was a key slide, and I wasn't able to present that and show that and demonstrate the point I was trying to make. So that was annoying. That was annoying, but that's life, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I've had one. It was a small meeting, but the projector that I was told was set up for it didn't work, so I couldn't use any slides. I just had to talk.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
so that was just a frustrating, but still went okay.
Yeah.
So
I remember I used to go onto sites a lot, construction sites a lot, and I was in my latter years as a geologist. I was a bit of a troubleshooter, so we'd get a phone call, Andrew, can you go to this site and sort out what's going on? So you go there and you'd see half a dozen men and machines standing around. You go and investigate, find out what the problem was, sort it out, and then go and report to your boss on site and get things moving again. And then you would come back and relay the information to the client or to your boss. And so those sorts of conversations where I used to enjoy presenting those because something had happened, something had gone wrong, or someone had found something that they weren't expecting. So they needed someone to come and say, yes, do this. Not there's 10 options and we'll talk about them for 3 days. You know, you've got men and machines standing there doing nothing. What do we do now to get this moving? And so having the experience that I had at the time to be able to say, yep, we're going to do this, go and do that, we'll move it forward and get things moving. It was very fulfilling because you feel as though you've succeeded and you've achieved something. And so that when you go back to the office, you'd write it up. I remember one particular occasion. This was very early on in my career. I've been to site, and we were always told to make plenty of notes in your notebook and then write it all up. I want a full report, and this was way before we had computers. So unless you were very lucky and were able to get on the good side of the typing pool to them to type up your report, it was all just handwritten. So I wrote this handwritten report of what I'd observed over the weekend. I wrote it up on Monday, sent it round, distributed it to half a dozen people. And about 11 o'clock in the morning, this guy came huffing and puffing up the stairs with these sheets of paper in his hand. And he went, have you read this report? And I went, read it, I wrote it. And I then had to calm him down about what had happened on the site to say, look, we've solved it, we've sorted it out. But I was told to give a full and comprehensive report, and so that's what I did. And yeah, I perhaps put too much detail in there, but my boss always wanted me to give a full and comprehensive report. But this poor chap from a different department came up and was quite flustered until we sat down and had a chat, and he was quite reassured then. But that one sticks in my mind as a funny one. Have you read this report? Yeah, I read it, I wrote it, mate. And just the context of something, it's amazing how some people can react to receiving some information. They can be, oh yeah, that's fine, put it over there and I'll file it in 2 days time. Or they can have the other reaction, which is, oh my god, what does this mean? And immediately come hurtling up the stairs to try and find out from someone what this means. Yeah, if he'd have actually read the whole thing through, he'd have found the conclusion at the end and all the rest of it. But
that's the thing. I think a lot of people, they read it quickly and they'll pick up the wrong conclusion, or they'll pick up something that may be sensational and they'll get worked up.
Yeah. Of course, I had to, in the report, I told them the problem that we had found, and then I came up with the solution, and everyone was happy at the end. But he got to the problem and went, "Oh no, problem! What do we do?" and came running up the stairs, rather than sat down for 5 minutes and thought about it and read the rest of it. But that was just his way. It was one of those things. He was alarmed by it, but So yeah, you're right. It's important that if you've given something to read, you either get an executive summary, which tells the whole thing in 1 or 2 pages, or you take the time to read it all through. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting presenting. It can be very exhilarating, very thrilling to actually present and see the audience, you know, being taken on board along the journey that you've led them through to get to the 2 or 3 key points and the takeaways at the end. It's very fulfilling when you can see that they got it, and then the questions that they ask means, yeah, they've understood what you've said, and that's a great boost to your morale. That
Yeah, especially that they ask the questions that you've missed out from the
yes,
detail. You thought, I've missed out that detail because it's probably too much. When you normally get a couple of people who are really interested and like detail, and they'll ask questions about detail, and they'll pick up quickly, and that's good. This is what people who
yeah,
very good to have
yeah,
at
I agree.
a presentation.
Yeah, I have sometimes when I'm going to someone else's talk, presentation, I'll meet them outside or something. I say, are there any questions you would particularly like to be asked if you're not asked? So that I can be his stooge, if you like, to ask that question. But I've done it a few times, and it's gone down well, because I obviously don't let on to anyone else that I'm a plant for that question. But it sometimes when you ask for questions, nothing happens, and people think, I don't want to ask the first question to be seen to be asking something that was stupid because he might have covered it and I didn't pay attention. So there is always that sometimes with, as an audience member, they don't want to ask the first question in case they make themselves look ridiculous. But
Yeah,
I
that's
was never
interesting.
shy. I was never shy of asking the stupid question, because it it made people think, and if we were all thinking about what we were doing and what we were trying to resolve, we can get to a solution quicker. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes when I'm at presentations listening, the questions seem very obvious. Something basic. I think, well, I need to ask that question, otherwise I want to understand the full story. So I'll ask questions just because I think I can't help it. I have to, otherwise
It's,
I'll understand nothing. So
yeah, I'm the same. In meetings with clients, I would be sitting there thinking, why is no one asking this question? And I eventually just have to ask it and take the consequences.
yeah,
But
some things seem obvious, and then you wonder, yeah, why no one else has
yeah, I haven't been thinking
brought
about it.
it up. But
Yeah, yeah, interesting, interesting. Well, we're rapidly approaching time again, so unless there's anything else you wanted to add, I'm going to sign off.
no,
And if anyone's watching this on replay, then if you've got any questions, then please feel free to drop me a line or comment on the YouTube video. But and other than that, we'll sign off